Connor O'Gara, our friend from Saturday Down South, joining us here on Halftime. Connor, the show went off the rails a few minutes ago because the theme right now, Arkansas baseball has won 2 out of 3, 6 consecutive weekends. And they've won 12 weekends in a row, but it's been 2 out of 3, 6 straight weekends. I don't know if you're aware or alert of the song by Meatloaf about 2 out of 3 ain't bad in college baseball. In baseball, heck, 2 out of 3 is freaking fantastic. But then all of a sudden the show goes off the rails and talking about Meatloaf and great rock singers. So I don't know if you can get us back on the rails here. Do you want to go college baseball for a moment, or do you want to go rock and roll for a moment?
To be honest, I'm not really as well versed in either of those subjects as I probably should be. Never been a Meatloaf guy or anything like that. I had like a brief phase in high school where I was pretty into the 80s metal. But other than that, my knowledge in those subjects is shallow at best.
Okay, so we can do the football thing, which is what we usually do anyway. So over the weekend, Tennessee's top tackler. I know Tennessee just got Texas's top tackler. I love all this alliteration. And then Tennessee's top tackler, whose last name is Tutu, transfers to Alabama. And then
No. Phil, you can do better than that. It's
to the Tide.
To
the Tide. I didn't remember how to say his last name because I'm all into college baseball these days. But then puts out an Instagram with a Dodge Challenger, which now has everybody all up in arms thinking that he has been given a car by a booster or something. And it's just that's why last week I asked you, May is like a slow month for college football, and I'm proven wrong, just like you told me I'd be proven wrong.
It happens, and I think it happens at more places than people realize. And when all of the name, image, likeness stuff gets figured out in the next couple months here, and that actually goes into effect, you're going to see a lot more pictures of vehicles that you'll be surprised belong to college football players. I'm not saying you're going to see the gold Trans Am of a certain former SMU star who inexplicably didn't end up at Texas A&M. But you're going to see some vehicles come out of the woodwork, I think. And you know what? I don't really have a problem with it. I think that they're a little bit more prevalent than people realize. But yeah, probably best for this current climate to just kind of hold off on that for a little bit. Maybe the timing of that for Henry To'oTo'o, not the best, considering, you just transferred to a big-time program. The big-time program would like to be able to kind of keep things under wraps, especially when the previous program that you just left is going to be investigated by the NCAA for potential recruiting violations. So, just optics-wise, it's not the best to have that thrown out there. But, at the same time, I think the world is changing. College football is changing. And soon enough, we're going to be at a place where that's not going to cause such a stir.
So, and in that world where that doesn't cause much of a furor, there is this, and it's probably true, this theory. It is true that there are going to be inequities in the locker rooms amongst, which student athletes make certain amounts of money over other ones based upon what positions they play, the success that they have, the sports that they play, so on and so forth, what's going to happen in their future. But this also just sounds a lot like real life. Even in professional sports, that's the case. In regular office settings, there are jealousies, there are rivalries. And there's already been some of this in college sports anyway. So I don't know. I don't know if I worry about that aspect of the name, image, and likeness stuff all that much. It's just going to reflect real life a lot more.
Yeah, and we won't really know until we see this play out. And at certain places, that disparity is going to be greater than at others. I always picture a place like BYU this past year would have been really interesting. Now they have their own honor code within that school, so maybe that's not the best example. But when you come from a smaller school and you're a big-time national player like a Zach Wilson, and then that disparity becomes that much greater where, Zach Wilson by season's end would have had headband companies reaching out to him being like, hey, it's probably going to still have to be within the confines of whatever sort of apparel deal the school has. But picture Zach Wilson having a different headband coming out every single week, and he's like, what Jim McMahon was in the mid-'80s. And he's able to benefit off that, whereas his offensive lineman who's blocking for him, he's not really going to be able to see that same sort of deal. But that's just the nature of college football as it exists currently. I don't think that dynamic is really changing that much. If you go to Auburn to play offensive line, yeah, you're going to realize that Bo Nix is going to be a little bit more popular than you are. That's going to benefit him in ways that it probably won't benefit you, and you might not have the same sort of opportunities available to you within college, after college, all of that. I don't necessarily see that dynamic changing that much. Now, is it maybe going to create a little bit more of a rift? Yeah. I mean, we got to remember, these are still kids between the ages of 18 to 22, and if there are situations in which a quarterback is greatly surpassing what his teammates are, then that's maybe a little bit more extreme, and those dynamics can be taken into account differently. But at the same time, I'm very much in wait-and-see mode with all of this, just to see how these dynamics play out, and I don't want to assume that it's automatically going to be for the worse when I think we need to kind of wait and see how all of it plays out.
Connor O'Gara joining us here on Halftime. Connor, one of your colleagues, Chandler Vessels, over there at Saturday Down South, wrote a pretty good piece talking about just the 5 things that will define this Razorback defense. And I want to get your thoughts on this Razorback defense that has some question marks that need to be filled. But, Connor, it's been a long time since you could say this Razorback team and this Razorback defense has good depth at the linebacker position. And I think that'll lead the way with this defense this season. Where's your confidence level with this Razorback defense as a whole right now?
Yeah, I said that they're going to be the most improved defense in the SEC, and I believe that. And I think part of that, too, is just, as we've talked about, the numbers, again, really skewed and didn't necessarily reflect the job that Barry Odom did in year one, especially those first 6 games where they looked like one of the better units in the SEC. But when you have that confidence in the middle of the defense, it just makes all the difference. And when you have 10 of 11 starters returning, whatever that number is, you should be confident. And you should be confident when you actually get a full offseason to learn a system, and those reps are going to be treated much differently than they were last year. And we talk about defense as a position in which guys are so often on their heels in the way that today's game is built. And with Barry Odom's defense, they're really going to be able to process that a lot differently this year. Now, I think that it's still going to come down to keeping those key guys healthy, right? I mean, we say that the depth has improved, but if they lose a Grant Morgan, if they lose a Jalen Catalon, that's different. That changes what they're going to be capable of. But you have to feel really encouraged about what they have defensively, because if you can at least be mediocre on that side in the SEC, in today's day and age, you have a chance. It doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees you the ability to at least stay on the field and not be kind of run off it the way that Arkansas has, under the previous regime. So I feel really good if I were an Arkansas fan about this defense. The offense could have some growing pains to start off. Still, I'm optimistic about the long-term outlook of KJ Jefferson and this running game as well. I think that the defense is going to have to do some of the heavy lifting early on.
I think the biggest thing about this Razorback defense, and a lot of people are talking about it, just who's going to fill the shoes of Jonathan Marshall. Went to the 6th round to the New York Jets, and Connor, he made a big difference on that defensive line this season. How crucial is it to find maybe not necessarily a replacement for him, but maybe a replacement by committee amongst those guys to really shore up that defensive line that has some experience, but not necessarily a lot of starting defensive line experience?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, that was an issue last year for Arkansas. That was the biggest area I thought on any side of the ball in which it was pretty evident that they were still rebuilding and that they were still trying to put this thing together. You have to have those stud defensive linemen. And it's weird because the draft didn't really reflect that. And it seemed like the draft itself, where we're usually talking about these SEC defensive linemen coming off the board in the top 10 picks, we didn't have that this year. And it was strange to kind of see that change of guard. But I'm still a believer that you need to have these guys studs. And Arkansas doesn't have somebody like a Jordan Davis that Georgia has to be able to kind of take on multiple blocks and to be able to stop the running game. But you still need those guys up front to be able to stop the run in this league. Running backs in the SEC coming back this year are really, really good. I've labeled 2021 is the return of the back in the SEC. It is going to be a stud year for these backs in the SEC, with probably 7 different teams that think that they have the best running back in the SEC to start off. So if you realize that that's kind of what you're up against, yeah, you need to be able to figure out positions on the defensive line, need that depth, and need to be able to replace a guy like Marshall, who is one of the few guys who could consistently get into the backfield. You need that if you're Arkansas, and that could determine how high this group is ultimately able to go.
Connor, we always appreciate your expertise on college football and certainly some of the difficult pronunciations. That's To'o, correct?
That was good. That was much better than Tutu.
It just takes one time for me to learn it, and then I'll never forget it. Yeah, you got to join us for the start of the NCAA basketball tournament next year when we do the pronunciation bowl. We're finding the most difficult names on each roster. That was a lot of fun. You find actually more difficult names in college basketball than any other sport right now.
Well, let me ask you this, Connor. How hard was it talking about pronunciations? How hard was it to pronounce Tua Tagovailoa at first for you?
I mean, you still don't have it, so it's got to be pretty tough, right? Tua Tagovailoa. Tua Tagovailoa. You just got to say it like 8 or 9 times the way that we do it on the podcast where we talk about these guys so much. I mean, it ends up turning into just Tua, but at the same time, I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't already practicing DJ Uiagalelei multiple times a day throughout the offseason.
I gave up.
Ready to go for the season opener.
I gave up on that one immediately the moment I even saw it. Yeah, and it's you got to be thankful that you replace Tua Tagovailoa with Mac Jones and then Bryce Young, like the easiest names in the history of Alabama football this side of Joe Namath. All right, Connor, we got to run. Appreciate you, man. Have a great week.
Thanks, Connor.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. That's Connor O'Gara. You don't need a pronunciation guide for his name. That's an easy one, too.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute. It's Smackdown.
Smackdown.
Is that how you say it properly?
Put the yinzer. Yeah, you need to start putting the yinzer.
K is silent.
The Yinzers would call it Smackdown. Smackdown in that. Hey, they also talk about the Yumdinger sometime with the Yinzers. The Yumdinger is what you use to catch largemouth bass that are spawning right now at ponds and lakes all over Arkansas and Oklahoma. The Yumdinger is made by Pradco Outdoor Fishing in Fort Smith. 3, 4, 5, 6-inch sizes. They're in tackle boxes of all the bass anglers all over the United States and all over the world. It's also in tackle boxes of boxers who fish.
Oh.
You'll find them at Walmart, Bass Pro Shops, Academy, LearnThat.com, and tackle stores all over the place. The Yum Dinger. Right back.